Hello and welcome to West Indies on 99.94 Cricket Every Day. My name is Mashal St. Patrick Hewitt, one half of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, and with me is Everest Santoki Nagulendran, the other half of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. West Indies on 99.94 is your new home for West Indies cricket content, and we'll be dropping into your podcast feed on YouTube or on the 99.94 app. And we'll do that several times every week. So please rate, review, and subscribe. And thanks for joining Cricket's conversation. Today on West Indies on 99.94, we're going to be talking about Nicholas Pooran's shock resignation. Santoki, take it away.
Masho, I don't know whether we still call these emergency podcasts. It seems to be happening on a weekly basis. Bombshell news dropping in the region regarding our cricket. And this week is no different. Nicholas Pooran has relinquished the white ball captaincy for the West Indies men's team in the wake of their abysmal World Cup performance. Now, we did an episode three or 4 weeks ago looking at whether Pooran would stay on as captain and whether he was right for the role. So I guess it's not come as a complete shock for us, but I guess it is surprising that it has come so soon. So in this episode, we're going to analyse things as always, break down what perhaps led to him handing in his resignation notice and what this means for West Indies cricket on a wider level. Now, Mashal, let's get into it. The first thing I think is, obviously, West Indies had the regional Super 50, our domestic white ball competition. Nicholas Pooran was unsuccessful in the final. Jamaica Scorpions were victorious with Rodman Powell being a captain, but I know a lot of people, it's been going around that a lot of people have said this might have played a part in it as well. I don't think the Super 50 played any part in his thinking. I think that decision would have been made and it's probably just been announced now because he has a break from cricket in the region. In essence, I think it boils down to two things, Mashal, and you can say whether you agree or disagree with me. One, the World Cup exit and the cuss out from the region that followed. And two, losing his IPL contract and status and the effect that the West Indies captaincy was having on his own playing performance. It got to a point where he was financially losing by having to not being picked up in the IPL. So I think these two reasons are probably, in my opinion, what boils down to him culminating in handing in his resignation. But over to you, Mash. What do you sort of make of all of this?
Yeah, some valid points there, Santoki. I think fundamentally both of them are correct. I mean, we'll probably get into the third one a bit later in the show, but I'd probably throw in there as well kind of the looming independent review that is due to take place. Now, I'm not saying that Nicholas Pooran quit because the independent review might have cussed him out and said that he'd shown poor leadership or poor captaincy or anything like that. But really and truly, Santoki, who wants to be a leader when you know that the whole kind of organization of which you are an integral part is having a review? No, because no matter what comes out of that review, there'll be something that effectively tarnishes Nicholas Pooran's name in essence. And even if the review wouldn't even have named him, he's tarnished by association. So, and I tie that point to your original point about IPL and this, that, and the other, in so much as Santoki, and I want to hear your views on this. The last 6 months of Nicholas Pooran being captain, this is the one thing I think you and I can agree on, and everybody might agree on. It has tarnished his brand, right? Now, some people will hear that statement and be like, what do you mean brand? Nicholas Pooran's a West Indies cricketer, except he is, but outside of West Indies cricket, Nicholas Pooran, as do a lot of our West Indian players, they have a brand to protect. And that brand is crucial for a West Indies cricketer in a completely different way to how it is for an England cricketer or an Australian cricketer. Because at the end of the day, an England cricketer or an Australian cricketer can still eat a big food just off the back of their central contract that they can earn. If Nicholas Pooran wants to maximize his earnings in addition to the, let's say, 250k he might make for playing for the West Indies, his brand has to still be elite. And Santoki, I would postulate that the 6 months of being attached to the West Indies brand has destroyed his name, Santoki.
Let me. Your first point was actually really good. I think most listeners will be able to sort of relate to. I mean, in any walk of life, your job, if you haven't met targets and your employer announces they're going to do a review in everything that's gone on, naturally your name will be tarnished, whether directly or indirectly. So the same is applied to Nicholas Pooran. So completely agree there. And secondly, we said when Pooran took the job, it was admirable, but we could see why it's a thankless job being a West Indies cricket captain. And Nicholas Pooran is an elite franchise cricketer. He succeeds in leagues wherever he goes. He's wanted by teams across the world. A peak overseas player in the IPL. So it did almost seem like a lose-lose situation for him taking over the West Indies captaincy, because we know the systematic issues in the side. We know that Nicholas Pooran taking over captaincy wasn't going to revolutionise the team and the performances. So essentially, we said he'd taken it out of love for the West Indies brand and that sort of patriotism for the West Indies brand, and maybe he'd been influenced by Kieran Pollard. Now we've seen, obviously, he's only been in the role for 7 months. He's handed his resignation. I think this is symbolic of just how gargantuan a task it is to try and fix what's going on in West Indies cricket. The fact that Pooran has essentially ducked out after 7 months. And as you said, the brand has been affected. I think that's the main thing. Obviously, cricketing, as with any sporting careers, are very, very short. You've got to protect your brand. With more and more franchise leagues popping up across the world, more big contracts available, Nicholas Pooran must have looked at it and realised, you know what? Playing for West Indies, it's bringing me down a bit, My stats are going down, my reputation's going down. I'm falling down from that elite level. I need to get out as soon as possible. So, I mean, I can completely understand it. At the end of the day, you need to make as much money as you can while you can. And so he's made it, in essence, is partly a business decision, I think he's made, to kind of pull out from the Maroon. If we look at his stats, I think as captain in the ODIs, before captaincy, he was averaging about 42, and it fell down to 28 during his captaincy. He's only scored 94 in his last 10 T20 innings. So his form has just fallen off a cliff. And I think on a personal level, he just felt he probably needed to take a break from the pressure cooker of captaincy, reflect on his own game, improve, secure an IPL deal again, get that money back in order, and play for West Indies without that pressure. So it's a whole load of issues. But ultimately, Mash, this has come up here. This isn't an isolated incident. You tweeted on social media, and you know what? You know what? It actually reminded so in fact, it's like a soap opera at the moment, because I forgot just how many events have happened in West Indies cricket in the last 6 or 7 months. Roger Harper cussed out of the job. Kieran Pollard cussed out of the job. Phil Simmons cussed out of the job. Shimon Hetmeyer missing the plane. Everything with Evan Lewis cussing out on Facebook. And now this has come as well. John Campbell being banned. Now this has come. It's just all I don't even know where. No other team in international cricket is like this. I just feel if this was an isolated event, you could process it. But the fact is, come after a roller coaster of events over the past few months, Mash. Just what does this reflect about the current state of West Indies cricket?
I can only tell the audience, those listening and watching, what I text you. I think it was on Sunday. I sent you a message saying, we support a team that is an absolute shambles. and the thing is, you have to laugh, because if you don't laugh, you have to cry. Because how can so many... You didn't even include the Andre Russell cuss out. Like, and all the fitness tests being failed. How can one team have so many issues befall it? Like, and we're not talking like months apart. It's every single month we have to release an emergency pod to deal with the latest issue or crisis in West Indies cricket. But do you know something? And then just going off the back of, again, some of the stuff you said about Pooran, and this is pure speculation, and we kind of spoke about it in the IPL episode we did. Shimron Hetmeyer retained his contract with the Rajasthan Royals. Andre Russell retained his contract with Kolkata, as did Sunil Narine. None of them played for West Indies or have really played for West Indies. Do you think, Santoki, like I say, I'm not saying that this is what went through Pooran's head per se, but do you think that played a role in him thinking, look how good life is for them, and they don't have the burden of having to captain the West Indies side and go from international bilaterals to World Cup. None of these men really played. Well, in 2 cases, didn't play at all, and in 1 case, barely played, then missed some plane flights, and life is looking good for their bank balance. Do you think he would have reflected on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it would only be human nature. And especially if you think pretty much the whole summer, Nicholas Pooran has bore the brunt of cuss-outs in the region, whether that be from journalists, fans. Whereas he probably looked around at Hetmeyer and the Ryan and thought, you know what, these guys are free of that pressure. They essentially can play cricket, earn their money without being involved with West Indies cricket. So for me, as a young man, he's still young. What is he, 26, 27? To go through 4 or 5 months of sustained pressure in that role, because obviously we had the series against India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, New Zealand, where results didn't necessarily go our way. And then you had the long tour in Australia, flying up for the World Cup and the bilaterals against Australia again. A lot of pressure. He probably just looked at, other players who have opted out of West Indies and thought, you know what, they're essentially making money, enjoying their cricket. I think more so, enjoying is the word. I think you can see in IPL for Rajasthan, Hetmeyer enjoys being there. And I don't think you necessarily see that whenever, on the rare occasions, we do see Hetmeyer playing for the West Indies. So I think that has definitely played a part. It's also important that you mentioned Sunil Narine there. He would have been with Sunil Narine for the past 3 weeks in the Trinidad and Tobago side at the Red Force. I'm sure as a senior player, he would have gone to Sunil Narine for advice. No doubt probably spoken to DJ Bravo, Kyron Pollard. I don't think this is a rash decision. I think he's thought about it over the past few weeks and probably turned to the seniors in Trinidadian cricket for advice. And it'd be interesting to know kind of how that discussions went. But I think this is something he's thought long and hard about. I genuinely believe he does care about West Indies cricket. But at the end of the day, he's made a decision which he feels will benefit his own cricket career long term.
Well, you raised some really good points there that I want to explore, but let's explore those ones after this short break.
You're listening to Cricket's Conversation on 99.94. Whatever your team, we have the show for you on podcast, YouTube, or on the 99.94 app. We have India, England, South Africa, West Indies, and now Sri Lanka covered. If you want to find us, the best way is to follow us on social media at 9994DM by downloading the 9994 app or Google 99.94 on podcast. We speak cricket.
So Santoki, you said before the break that you think Nicholas has made the right decision, and I tend to agree with you. And I just want to kind of go into that and then analyze that a bit further, because I had written down on a piece of paper in our pre-show notes that Nicholas had made a brave decision. Because if you take a leadership role of, and more importantly, the leadership role of something as chaotic as the West Indies cricket team, and you quit after 6 months, it's brave to me to turn around. And I mean brave not brave in the sense of, oh, wow, you've done this, but more so brave in that admitting to himself, this isn't working and I'm going to stand down. And I just wanted to explore that a tiny piece in so much as actually, do we have to turn around and applaud him for recognizing early, you know what, this ain't working for me. It's mashed up my personal form. It's not working with me as captain. We're holding licks. The people of the region aren't happy with it. Where do you stand on that argument, Santoki, in so much as saying, actually, if you know it's not working, because he could easily, Santoki, have limped on to the ODI World Cup qualifiers and said, well, boy, okay, the T20 World Cup was awful, but let me try come and revitalize myself for the ODI World Cup, and let me try and show people that I am a good captain. But he's called it quits and said, you know what? I'm not the man for this. Where do you stand on saying, actually, well done for recognizing?
Yeah, definitely. I think you have to respect him for that. I mean, we saw with Jason Holder, particularly in ODI cricket, how when he hung on to the job, it just got worse and worse and essentially prolonged the misery. So I think it's a brave decision because regardless of how you look at it, it's also going to taint his character, having essentially quote unquote failed in the captaincy role and having left after 7 months. So that's going to hurt. That's going to hurt your own confidence and ego having to do that. But it's also a brave decision because, like you said, he could have carried on to the ODI World Cup or the qualifiers, limped on to then, and then resigned after that. But he decided, you know what, in the best interest of West Indies cricket, I'm going to step aside. We're not playing any white ball cricket for the next 5 months. Let the new coach come in, let him pick a new captain, and let's give them time to rebuild. So I think ultimately he's done a decision which is also going to be beneficial for West Indies cricket as well. It's not obviously a snap decision. He's thought about it. So I think you have to admire it, because obviously when you're an elite sportsman, you have to have a certain level of confidence. And that often leads to players staying in positions, captaincy positions, longer than needed. So for him to make this decision, I'm sure it was hard for him, but you have to respect it as a brave one.
Yeah, and also when we look at the statement that he released, Nicholas kind of alluded to, listen, the best way that I can contribute to this side is to relinquish the captaincy and focus on contributing with the bat, and almost alluding to the fact, you called the stats earlier on, Santoki. Once upon a time, if we just look at ODI cricket, Nicholas was averaging 40. And that's why people would speak about him and Shimron Hetmeyer and say, well, boy, they're our next two good batters, because you look at you looked at their previous ODI numbers and you were like, boy, it looks like they might actually be at like the top level of the game. Now, obviously, we're talking about Pooran, the form has tapered off. So Nicholas said in his statement, listen, if you really want me to contribute in the best way, it's not with the captaincy, it's relinquishing the captaincy and refocusing on making big runs again. And then we've just seen him finish Super 50. I think it's a second top run scorer in Super 50. So where do you see him as saying that for the sake of saying it, or do you believe that he's looked and gone, yeah, let me just get my batting back on form and that will actually help the team?
Yeah, I believe so. I think he's, as you said, before captaincy, he was one of our top performers, especially in ODI cricket, averaging over 40, which is massively needed in the side. So yeah, I do think as well, he's probably thought, my batting, if I can get my performances back, it will help the West Indies. It's interesting to read into sort of the statement Cricket West Indies put out from Jimmy Adams. It was a quick 3 lines thanking him for his service. So you can read into that. Maybe they weren't too happy about him relinquishing the captaincy, because there wasn't a full-blown tribute. It was just a short, snappy statement. But I think, actions speak louder than words, Mash. We've got to see if he does commit to West Indies. We've got the bilaterals coming up in South Africa, probably the ODI World Cup qualifiers in Zimbabwe in June. Bearing in mind he's not captain, essentially he's not tied up to having to play. Obviously, he's got a central contract up until July. So he would be required to play in the South Africa unless he was injured or unavailable for whatever reasons. But after July, it'd be interesting to see if he takes a central contract or if he becomes a freelancer franchise player. My gut feeling is if he does reject a central contract, we probably will see him be very selective with what series he plays. And then that will be obviously where there'll be a fallout, because he's obviously given a statement committing himself to West Indies cricket. But at the end of the day, if you're balancing financially lucrative tournaments against bilateral series, you're going to go for the financially lucrative tournaments, regardless of the optics. So I think it'll be a tricky period coming up next year to see kind of if he does commit to West Indies. Obviously, we'd like to see him play as much as we can for West Indies. I think a West Indies side without him in the middle order and keeping wicket, it's going to struggle even more than it is has been for the past few years. So it'll be very, very interesting to see kind of what his status is with West Indies cricket going forward. Now he's not tied down as such by having to be a captain who shows up for every single game.
Yeah, you can bet your bottom dollar, people, that when our new central contracts are announced in late June, early July, there are going to be a lot of interested eyes looking at where, if Nicholas Pooran's name isn't there. And if it isn't there, Santoki, listen, we're going to have to do another emergency pod. Another emergency pod in July, looking at the ramifications of that. But we shall wait for like the 6 months or so till that point to see whether there is actually a deeper underlying issue behind Nicholas giving up the captaincy now. But let's take another quick break, Santoki, because after the break, as ever with a West Indies on 99.94 podcast episode, what next for West Indies cricket?
If you love the language of cricket and want more, then head over to the 99.94 app and you can hear all of our podcasts and cricket commentary. We're adding new shows all the time and covering cricket series from all over the world. Be the first to hear all of our announcements by following us on social media at 9994DM. Welcome to Cricket's Conversation.
So, Santoki, Pooran's gone, and you alluded to the fact that he said in his statement, I want to give a new coach and obviously now a new captain the best preparation lead-in time ahead of the ODI World Cup potential qualifiers, etc. But hear me now, Santoki. The only preparation is an ODI series versus South Africa in March. And then more than likely that then goes into World Cup qualifiers. So what preparation, Santoki, is a new coach and a new captain really getting other than those 3 ODIs? We've just had Super 50. There'll be no 50 over cricket for the new coach and new captain to look at players. What we've just seen in November is what we've seen. So whoever goes to South Africa in March for that ODI series is largely coming off the back of Super 50, which would have been then 4 months before that series. This is where I'm slightly critical of Nicholas, having just said before the break that he's brave. What is he really expecting a new captain and coach to do with this side in that short space of time? I mean, obviously he could argue that's not my problem. Listen, that's for the new captain and new coach. But let's deal with that aspect first, Santoki. I would argue, Santoki, that the new captain and by proxy the coach are on a hide into nothing now. Simmons gone, Pooran gone. Whoever comes next, they're ready to catch that immediate cuss out, Santoki, at the World Cup qualifiers. Where do you stand with it?
So the thing is, you know, in football, when you get like a new head coach and they come in and you get immediately there's an upturn in results because players want to perform and keep their place in the side because they might lose their place. The problem is in West Indies cricket, that can never happen because, like you said, the players don't have to worry about their plays essentially because underneath that, there's no one sort of coming through generally. Like if you're a middle order batsman, if you're a Hetmeyer, for instance, and you make yourself available for West Indies, even if you're out of form, you know it's unlikely you're going to get replaced by someone from the region just because they haven't played enough cricket across the region and the quality just isn't there. So even a new head coach, you're not going to come in with that fresh impetus and get immediate results. So as you said, it's going to be another thankless task. It'll be interesting to see sort of who they go for in terms of head coach. We'll probably do an episode looking at potential candidates or when they do make the announcement. In terms of the captaincy match, now this is the big one because obviously all signs seem to be destined to Rovman Powell taking over the job. The image of him lifting the Super 50 sort of put him as the front runner in most fans' minds. However, he hasn't played that much ODI cricket for West Indies. I think he's over the course of 6 years, he's played about 45 ODIs. This year, he played against India, Bangladesh, but he missed the New Zealand series. I don't think he's experienced enough in the nuances of ODI cricket to suddenly take over as captain and guide us through qualifiers into the World Cup. So I think in terms of ODI, it'd be interesting to see if they split it again and if they have a separate T20 captain and ODI, or they just go for one unified white ball captain. I mean, as you've alluded to, I don't think it'll make a massive difference whoever is captain because it's going to be the same cohort of players you're picking from. But I would like to see Rovman Powell definitely in the T20s. I think it's right for him to be captain. ODIs, because of his lack of experience, I don't think he'd necessarily be the best choice for 50 over cricket. But then who would be? A lot of people have said Shai Hope. I'm not sure if he's captaincy material, if he's got the leadership. He's got the tactical knowledge to be a vice captain, but in terms of those leadership qualities, I'm not sure if he has it. A few people have said Jason Holder. I'm not even sure, one, if their selectors would want to go back to Jason Holder as a captain, and two, if Jason Holder even wants it himself. So the cupboard is sparse in terms of that, and I could see that being a reason why they just give both formats to Rovman Powell. But Mash, what's your opinion? Where do you stand on sort of who should be captaincy frontrunners going forward?
Well, if I speak about ODIs first, I put a poll on our Twitter page asking who people think should be the next captain, right? And I said, should it be Jason Holder, Shai Hope, or Rovman Powell, or Clive Lloyd? And Santoki, the thing is, Clive Lloyd's winning the poll. Now, and the reason I put Clive Lloyd on there is because, and the thing is, obviously everyone thinks I'm joking, but I was actually being serious. The reason I put Clive Lloyd on there is because there is an argument to say that at 78 years old, Clive Lloyd not moving for the whole match and just directing the players might be more effective in terms of a captain than anybody else in the region. And I use that kind of analogy to more point out the leadership vacuum that exists in the region. Because effectively, we're looking at the short-termism of Rovman Powell having lifted the CPL trophy for the Talawars and then having lifted the Super 50 trophy for the Scorpions. And yeah, that's great. But it all, again, Santoki, it speaks to the short-termism that exists in West Indies cricket as a whole. Some people have forgotten that Rovman Powell's actually captained West Indies before. He captained us when we went to Bangladesh in 2018, and when we got destroyed in Bangladesh in 2018. And obviously it's 4 years later now, he's more mature and so on and so forth. I'm not convinced Shai Hope should be the next captain, even though that's where I think most people would say it should be in ODI cricket. We know already he's our best batter in ODI cricket. Would we really want to burden the one guy who can bat in our ODI side with the captaincy as well? I'm not convinced by that argument. But then the flip side is Rovman Powell has played 45 ODIs and averages 23. Arguably, there is no place for Rovman Powell in the West Indies ODI setup. He's had multiple goals at it before, but then you look at the other side of the argument and say, well, he just top scored in Super 50, so he's probably going to come back into the squad anyway. So how much of a stretch would it be to then give him the captaincy and say, well, you're back in the squad and here's the captaincy? Would you go back to Jason Holder? No, I wouldn't. So, like I say, Santoki, I think he'll ultimately go to Powell. It certainly will in the T20s. I probably would make him double up in ODIs. But here's the catch, Santoki. I think we'll be back here in the exact same position 6 months to 1 year later. Because, and maybe this is where we come to now wrap the show up with this argument, Rovman Powell's in the same boat as Shimron Hetmyer. He's in the same boat as Nicholas Pooran. He has a franchise brand to protect. I think Rovman Powell would answer the call from West Indies cricket, but somewhere in the back of Rovman Powell's head, he would probably be thinking as well, this West Indies cricket job is about to mash up my whole brand and mash up my career by me being associated with the failure that comes with captaining the West Indies. So I don't even know if Rovman would really want that kind of weight on his shoulders.
Yeah, it's a tough one because, like you said, he probably has realised, looking at having worked with Nicholas Pooran, just how much of a burden the job is. But also the fact that the West Indies brand, as we said on previous episodes, still does hold some weight. I guess if you're offered the captaincy job, it's a hard thing to turn down as well at the same time. So I can see why he could possibly be in a dilemma about it. But as you said, I think in ODI cricket, is it right to give it to Powell, knowing he hasn't established himself in the side? His numbers aren't high in the format. But if you look at that side, who else is there really? I mean, it's generally a side of, if you look at players' ages like a Shamar Brooks or Carl Mayers, they should be at the age where they could take over from leadership, but they're all still relatively new to international cricket. So this is the problem we have. There's a vacuum of experienced players of that age group who can sort of take up that leadership position. So, I mean, if it's not going to be Shai Hope or Rovman Powell at ODI captain, you're looking at that squad. Who else could it be? Jason Holder, maybe a Brandon King as a left choice pick. But other than that, there's not really many people that are holding their hands up. So I think it will be tricky. And as we've seen, the Super 50, there's a massive disparity between Super 50 quality cricket and international cricket. So as well as Rovman Powell's done for the Jamaica Scorpions in the middle order, it's going to be a massive jump to replicate that form in international cricket. But knowing the mindset of most West Indian fans, they'll be expecting him to play our first ODI against South Africa and hit a century in the middle order, batting with the tail end, when it's just probably not going to happen because he hasn't got that experience and he hasn't faced off against world-class bowlers on the international stage in 50 overs that much. So it's going to be another poison chalice. And like you said, Mash, in probably, you said a year, that's very optimistic. Probably in July, when we've crashed out of the ODI World Cup qualifiers in Zimbabwe, Rovman Powell holding his head in his hands after we've lost to Scotland. We'll be doing a podcast on whether Rovman Powell's going to stay in the job until the 2024 T20 World Cup. So, as you said, I think there's wider systematic issues, which is essentially at the moment, the West Indies captaincy job is almost set up for you to fail rather than prosper. If you do prosper, it's in spite of the system and everything going on. So I think from the majority of players that take it up going forward, they're probably going to find it a struggle. And as we said, with growing franchise leagues, growing opportunities to make money outside of West Indies cricket, how tempting, how lucrative is that West Indies captaincy role going to be in years to come? And that's a massive question for the region to address as a whole.
Most definitely. And we kind of said it at the top of the show, and we'll end the show with it again. People, there's never a quiet day in West Indies cricket. As ever, you can send us messages at Carib Cricket on Twitter and Instagram. If you're watching this on YouTube, comment below. Let us know your thoughts on Nicholas Pooran's resignation and what your feelings are about what comes next. But that's another episode of West Indies on 99.94 DM. Santoki, it's goodbye from me. Is it goodbye from you?
Yes, goodbye for me. And we had been planning to use this episode to do a Super 50 review, but as with always, something else has popped up. But hopefully our next episode, unless another bombshell happens in the next few days, our next episode, we haven't forgotten about it. We'll be analysing the regional 50 over tournament that took place a few days ago. So stay locked for that. And as Mashel said, if you've got any opinions, just hit us up and we'll be happy to debate them. Okay. So that's it from us here. Have a good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and stay locked.